I think I've always been interested in how technology can be leveraged to improve care delivery, to improve how we think about treating diseases, as well as our daily workflow. Yeah, I think wearables is a very interesting area, Gary, and something that's going to develop further quite a bit in the future. I think it's a really underutilized technology. Let me take a step back and first tell you, I think anytime you have idea or in general curiosity, it leads to a lot of good collaborations, and then you just kind of have to follow that path. So in this particular case, what happened was I was talking to one of my colleagues in physical therapy.
So, welcome everyone. This is yet another series in the podcasting, the surgeon scientist. And today we have the guest of honor, Dr. Amit Jain, one of the key opinion leaders in the North American Spine Surgery Forum. And he is chairing various committees, and he is a steering committee member in the AO Spine Knowledge Forum Regenerative. And he's also leading the emerging and enabling tech group of AO Spine. And we are going to have interesting talk with him. And welcome, Amit, to our show. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk on our show.
Thank you so much, Satish and Giri. Looking forward to a good conversation.
So, getting in straight ahead, can you tell us a bit about your early journey into orthopedics and what drew you specifically to spine surgery?
Sure, absolutely. I grew up in India till I was 11. We moved to the United States, lived in California, went there for middle school and high school. I was always a mechanical person and became interested in bioengineering. I felt that was a good combination of understanding the fundamental principles and how they apply to biology. And it was a nice kind of way to acquire a lot of engineering knowledge, which was really helpful in retrospect. After that, I decided to come to the East Coast and went to medical school at Johns Hopkins. And that was a really great career decision for me because it opened up a lot of doors. I met a lot of amazing people, including a few great mentors like Paul Sponseller and Cal Kabesh. And that was a great introduction to spine surgery because both those were really accomplished spine surgeons. I stayed at Hopkins for my residency in orthopedic surgery and had a really terrific time and loved it. I liked everything in residency, everything from shoulder surgery to joint replacement to spine. There really wasn't anything I didn't like, but spine, I think, was probably my favorite because there was a lot of different intricacies, a lot of different unsolved problems. And then I had the opportunity to go to Emory University to do a further subspecialization in spine surgery, so I did that. So it's been a great, really enjoyable path.
Sorry, that's really interesting journey, Dr. Amit. So what was there a turning point when you felt drawn towards integrating technology into clinical practice? Obviously, you had a biomed interest, so you would be looking for opportunities from the beginning of your practice. But was there a tipping point when you felt that there is a need for technology to be integrated into your clinical practice and develop various gadgets from there on?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've always been interested in how technology can be leveraged to improve care delivery, to improve how we think about treating diseases, as well as our daily workflow, thinking about ways where we can simplify things or make them more efficient. Technology is a great way to do that. So having the bioengineering background really enabled me to kind of have those ideas and be able to implement them. As well as I think the other thing it did is that it allowed me to create collaborative teams, which would then be able to propel into that direction and be able to kind of deliver some of the results.
Okay, is there any an inspiring patient story that made you to switch more towards making more innovative patient-centric tech solutions or things like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a specific patient story, but I think this is just more of what's in my DNA. This is how I think about the world and how I kind of the glasses or the flavor through which I view the world. So it's something I've always kind of done, and certainly as I've gone along my medical journey, I have become more inclined to do it even more because now I see the benefits. Like for instance, I see when we do certain things in an efficient way, how it impacts care, how it improves lives, and so on. So for me, it's an exciting way to kind of combine my natural interest with opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. So far, what were your ventures into tech products or wearables related to spine?
Yeah, I think wearables is a very interesting area, Gary, and something that's going to develop further quite a bit in the future. I think it's a really underutilized technology. So recently I came across potential or wearable technology that aims to assess cervical range of motion, for instance. And it got me thinking, what can we do with this? And it got me thinking, well, how do we, there are all these unanswered questions, such as what happens with 1 versus 2 versus 3 level ACDF, what happens with ACDF versus disc replacement in terms of functional motion, how does posterior cervical fusion versus laminoplasty impact fusion, and the impact range of motion. Impact range of motion. All of these things, I think, are questions that we traditionally used radiographs or use some kind of a crude measure to answer, but we're not really capturing the patient's true functional outcomes and functional data. And I think the wearable technology, because the one I just came across, can help assess for that. So that's just one example, right, of a wearable really being able to kind of improve our understanding as doctors of how patients are doing and what we could potentially guide them toward in terms of treatment decision making based on the wearable technology.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So, like, we need to understand how this partnership works. Like, you being in the Hopkins, like the industry approach you straight because of your institutional affiliation, or you personally know them and you want to collaborate with them on an individual level, or how does this meeting happen between the engineers and as a surgeon or as a spine surgeon? How does this start?
Yeah, that's a good story. So in this particular case, let me take a step back and first tell you, I think anytime you have idea or in general curiosity, it leads to a lot of good collaborations, and then you just kind of have to follow that path. So in this particular case, what happened was I was talking to one of my colleagues in physical therapy about using tele-rehab, which means using telemedicine and doing physical therapy using that mechanism. For some of our patients prior to ACDFs and microdiscectomies and things that where we can basically use tele-rehab as a way to educate patients. And while I was working on this project with this person, he said, "Oh, by the way, we have this really cool new toy that we got in therapy to check patients' cervical range of motion. Do you mind looking at it?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'd be happy to." So he kind of gave me a little demo, and I was really impressed. I was like, "Oh wow, this is great! Like we can use this in for our surgical patients for evaluation. Can you connect me to the company?" And he made the connection, and I reached out to the company, and the person gave me a demo, and again I was quite impressed. So I said, "Oh wow, this is great! Like this can be used by our group of surgeons who are all collaborating on research and thinking about how to answer some of these deep questions that we don't really have a clear answer to about functional motion." And that story basically ended up leading me to having that particular person present sensor-based technology to a group of surgeons through the AO Spine Knowledge Forum Degenerative. And I think the point here is not necessarily this particular product or the sensor or whatever. The point is, when you're curious and when you're collaborative, it leads to amplification of any potential opportunity much higher. And you can then really answer some important questions and create a group of friends. And that's how, I met great people like Satish. So I think it's just, those are the kind of opportunities you have to be open for.
That's a really wonderful and elaborate answer, taking us through your journey. So, according to you, what was the biggest challenge when surgeons and engineers start working together?
Yeah, I think there are a number, but probably the biggest challenge is being able to speak the same language. So in other words, a lot of times as surgeons, we are very clinically oriented. We think about the problem from the patient's perspective. We don't necessarily have a lot of interest or a lot of insight into kind of the nuances that are required to deliver a certain innovation, because we're so focused on the clinical solution to the problem and not so much the technical part of it. And I think the engineers a lot of times focus on the technical aspects and the details of the how and the what instead of the overall why. Um, and that's crossing that bridge and being able to communicate in the same manner, I think is very important and certainly can lead to some very nice opportunities. Similarly, I think the other problem is time management. So, for instance, at least for us, we are very busy clinically in terms of being in the operating room, seeing patients, doing education before surgery, after surgery, so on. So there's a lot of different clinical and education demands for on the both private and academic side. But finding the time in the middle of your workday where an engineer or engineering team is available to discuss and is able to kind of go over a project with you and you have the time to commit to really developing that, I think that can be a challenge. So I think of these as kind of quadrant 2 projects. So in other words, they're important, but not urgent. But so still, in order to make progress, you have to slowly drive these forward. Otherwise, you're going to be kind of stuck in that urgent but not important category, and that's not very good. So just one example of the engineering collaboration is a few years ago, I became introduced to a mechanical engineer at Hopkins. His name is Dr. Mehran Armand. And him and I were able to collaborate, and I was able to pitch some ideas to him about surgical robotics. He was working on robotic applications in healthcare and other fields. I was interested in surgical applications, and together we created this proposal that we submitted to the NIH for funding. And it actually got accepted for a R01 grant on its first application, which was great because the NIH was really impressed by the fact that a surgeon and engineer were collaborating and working together to develop this technology that had a very clear clinical direction, but then also had a great surgical team and a great engineering team as its kind of background. So I really think having opportunities with engineers can be quite fruitful, but you have to commit to being in the time and speaking the language.
So thank you so much. So the first challenge you said is to bridge the language barrier between the surgeon team and the engineering team, and the next one is to finding the right time between the team to work together. So the next question I want to lead you from this is like, is there anything like that helps to bridge this gap of speaking the same language? Like, what was your insights or takeaways from your initial meetings? Like, do we need some more knowledge on their basics to understand it better, or we need the better team to explain it in a better way to the surgeons so that they can understand it? So which way is better? Do we need to update ourselves on their ground, or we should ask them to make it easier for us to understand?
Yeah, I think both are important and have their place. And in the modern era where we have AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, there's really no barriers to essentially learning about a different area. So even if you don't understand how something works, you can just ask Gemini to explain it to you, and it will do a great job. So I think the point is that technology can be leveraged to demystify technology and provide you the appropriate nomenclature and the appropriate background of a given problem so that you can really think about it deeply and then be able to collaborate and partner with somebody who's not in your discipline to make progress.
Okay. So like, is there any structure in which how this communication can be made easier between the teams? Like how it has to be presented to the engineers? Is there any structure that we need to follow? Or is it just the idea, and if they get the idea and they can make it better by themselves? How does it go?
Yeah, I think like any project, you have to have sustained engagement in order for it to really work. So in my case, what we do is for a surgical robotic project, we have a weekly meeting, and I allocate and block off a certain time for it. It's 1 hour a week. And then we have everybody interested in that project come to the meeting. And it's all through Zoom. So there's no barrier to coming. So people can be in different locations or whatever. And, we have the surgeon, we have the engineer head, then we have a lot of postdoctoral fellows, the PhD students, then we have some medical students interested or residents interested. So it's a nice kind of a forum where both the collaboration opportunities naturally can develop between the engineers and the clinicians. But I think the commitment of having it every week and commitment of making sure that people are engaged and come and there's good content, I think that's really the key to success. So really the continual engagement.
That's a really wonderful answer. So structured weekly meetings help with keen interest and discipline. But from it, it's I understand that it's difficult to start a collaborative project with the engineers. And once you have something that is meaningful enough, how difficult is it to translate it to the industry and take it to the patients? That's where I think most doctors struggle, as we need ourselves as an entrepreneur taking the idea to the market. What's your experience in translating the products to the market?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Gary. And I think this is one where most companies that are kind of in the pre-startup phase, or most projects kind of fail, which is commercial. They call it the death valley of commercialization. So the idea is, and I think my view on this is the following. I think just like it takes a lot of effort to build a collaborative team to get the project up and running, it also takes a lot of effort to actually get it commercialized. And you have a couple of options. You can try to do it yourself, and sometimes there are medical doctors who are founders of the startup who spend a significant amount of time and bandwidth kind of driving it, and it's their baby, and they really wanted to succeed. And there's a number of models in the US where that has happened successfully, and I personally have a lot of friends who have done that. That's wonderful if you can do that. But typically what that requires is reducing some bandwidth and in other words, not spending all your time on clinical activity and research activity and kind of focusing on this more full time, or at least a significant portion of time for this to work. I think there are other models as well where the doctor can be the chief medical advisor, or can essentially be the medical or clinical advisor, but then the company is actually run and the drive is done by more of a business-oriented person or engineering-oriented person who's interested in commercialization. And I think that's another successful model, because then you have a full-time person who's really thinking about how to make this successful, how to bring it to the forefront, how to make sales, how to grow the network for marketing opportunities, and so on. And then the other big feature is regulation, right? Like the regulatory pathways are very intense, so you need somebody to kind of help you walk the product, whether it's a software solution, hardware solution, through the regulatory pathways. And I think that takes a lot of time and effort. So that's another good model. And again, in order for that to work, you have to take a little bit of a second chair or third chair, and let the first chair be somebody who has the time and the commitment to really drive it. And then you have to understand that the rising tide rises all boats. So in other words, 100% of zero is zero, and 1% of a lot is a lot, right? So that's just something to keep in mind.